Welcome to the first of 5 daily episodes that will make up the Communications and Behavior Change Accelerator. The water community has identified communication as one of the greatest obstacles to addressing global water challenges. Increasing awareness of water and its function, its value, and connection to other issues such as climate change can help to motivate policymakers and the public to act more water wisely. But how do we improve communication about the importance and complexity of water? And how can we generate awareness for lasting change? How do we change ingrained behaviors and entrenched narratives? These are some of the issues we will address in the Accelerator during the week. We will hear inspiring talks, examples of best practice, and get some fresh insights and ideas from our panel discussions. We hope that the Accelerator will give you concrete advice on how to reach a wider audience and empower people to make better decisions about water. The Communication and Behavior Change Accelerator is also part of the World Water Week Communications Initiative. Earlier this year, this initiative started with a training program to help support and encourage journalists and communicators to raise the importance of water. Thank you to the Grundfos Foundation for enabling the Communications Initiative, and also to Global Citizen and Water.org for their support. All segments will be available to watch afterwards on the YouTube channel of SIWI. In this first session, we will explore the need to improve communication about the complexity and importance of water, and why communicating and raising awareness about water can be a challenge to the water sector. Our speaker of the day is the Stockholm Water Prize laureate of 2021. In its citation, the nominating committee writes, "She is a world-leading authority on water scarcity and one of the world's greatest water communicators and educators." So here is Sandra Postel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening in today. People often ask me how I came to work on global water issues in the way that I do. So I thought I would just begin with my story. When I was 15 years old, my mother passed away, and I felt not only very sad, but lost and confused. But out of that experience of loss came a great gift. One day I was standing outside our little house in New York, and I realized that my purpose was to do something on behalf of the earth. My mother had always loved the ocean, and I grew up spending many days near the sea, so I could have easily become a marine scientist. But as I went through college and graduate school and my first job, it was freshwater that grabbed me. I found my niche, and I never let go. So what I'd like to talk about is what I've learned from 4 decades of research and writing and thinking about freshwater, and why I believe that communication, education, and expanding the community of concern about water is essential to creating a better water future for humankind and for life on Earth. Now, most of us know the basics about water. It is finite. It cycles endlessly between the sea, the atmosphere, and the land, through plants and trees, rivers, soils, aquifers, above ground, below ground, and of course, across time. There are no substitutes for water, and water sustains the web of life that keeps the planet functioning. Yet, early on, I realized that the ways we use and manage water do not respect these fundamental truths. Over the last couple centuries, we have built all sorts of impressive engineering to generate prosperity from water. Today, we have 60,000 large dams controlling the world's rivers to generate hydropower, manage floods, and supply water to cities and farms. We have enough canals and pipelines to transfer the yearly flow of 10 Colorado rivers to cities each year. If this infrastructure was positioned end to end, it would stretch halfway around the world. We have thousands of kilometers of levees to protect cities and farms from floods. And we've installed millions of pumps of all sizes to bring groundwater to the surface in order to allow farmers to irrigate and households to have water. This is really impressive engineering. And in my mind, it's hard to imagine our world of 8 billion people, nearly 8 billion people, without it. But it soon became clear to me that this engineering entails a kind of Faustian bargain. While it has brought much of the world enormous prosperity, it has broken the water cycle. Rivers are the blue arteries of the earth, but their flows are so disrupted now that they no longer deliver the fresh water and nutrients and sediment needed to sustain habitats and coastal fisheries. I came to see that groundwater depletion was the sleeping tiger of global water issues. In the mid-90s, using the best data I could find, I calculated that about 10% of the world's food was being produced by depleting groundwater. That did not bode well for future food security. Wetlands and floodplains, which are crucial to the storage and cleansing of water and provide vital habitat for fish and birds and wildlife, were rapidly being drained and filled. Today, more than half the global wetland area is gone. According to the latest Living Planet Index, since 1970, the global population of freshwater vertebrates has declined by 84%. That's a hard number for me to wrap my head around. It means for every 100 fish and frogs that existed 50 years ago, there are now only 16. That's a massive loss of life in a very short period of time. And so on the one hand, our style of water management has brought this amazing prosperity, but on the other hand, it directly threatens that prosperity, as well as the planet's whole interconnected web of life. Now, and hang with me, this will start to turn upward soon. But on top of all this, we have to reckon with climate change. As the atmosphere warms, it expands, which means it can hold more moisture. That increases rates of evaporation and precipitation. And we're already seeing more intense droughts, more intense floods. Back in the spring of 2018, you may recall, Cape Town, South Africa, narrowly escaped the unthinkable, shutting off the taps, the drinking water taps, for 4 million of its residents. 3 consecutive years of drought had dried up its reservoirs. City officials began publicly announcing day zero, the date water would no longer flow to household faucets. At that point, residents would need to retrieve their daily rations or their weekly rations of drinking water from one of 200 distribution stations around the city. Fortunately, conservation measures and the purchase of water from farmers allowed Cape Town to keep pushing day zero further out, and then luckily the rains came back. But this was a near miss that was a wake-up call for cities around the world. Scientists later determined that the probability of this kind of drought scenario occurring for Cape Town had tripled due to climate change. The year before, my home country, the United States, also got a wake-up call. 3 large hurricanes caused massive flooding in the south, and big wildfires swept through California and the West. That year, 2017, the cost of US weather and climate-related disasters was just off the charts, $306 billion US dollars. That's more than 6 times the average since 1980. And while that year was an outlier, climate scientists expect those high costs from natural and climate-related disasters to be more the norm for the United States by the end of this century. So the bottom line is that when it comes to water, the past is no longer a good guide for the present, much less for the future. And that means we must manage water differently, and we must move quickly to build more resilient water systems. Now, the good news is solutions exist. And the really good news is that they can help us solve multiple challenges at the same time. We simply don't have time to deal with our water, climate, and biodiversity crises in a piecemeal fashion. We need creative solutions that address them simultaneously. And what these solutions have in common is that they work more with nature rather than against it. They heal the water cycle rather than further breaking it. So think about flood control as an example. As floods get worse, instead of raising the height of dams, raising the height of levees, what if we strategically reconnect rivers to their natural floodplains? In this way, we can mitigate floods, capture more carbon, recharge groundwater, and build critical habitat for fish and wildlife. Soil health is another great example. Globally, soils can hold 8 times as much water as all the world's rivers combined. But we rarely manage soils as a water reservoir. Planting cover crops on farm fields is not just a soil health strategy, it's a water management strategy and a climate mitigation strategy. Healthier soils store more carbon in the soil, which slows climate change. Soils with more organic matter can hold more water, which helps mitigate floods and droughts. So scaling up these kinds of nature-based solutions is important, but it's challenging for us. We like to stay in our professional silos, right? But as I point out in my last book, Replenish, scaling these solutions will take new collaborations among engineers, ecologists, farmers, conservationists, businesses, public agencies. It will take ingenuity, new technologies, and new policies and incentives. And what about the general public? People often ask me, what can I, an ordinary citizen, do to help? And the answer, I think, is that everyone can conserve and everyone can shrink their personal water footprint. Everything we use and wear and buy and eat, right, takes water to make. A simple cotton shirt like I have on today can take 2,600 liters of water to make, mostly because it simply takes a lot of water to grow cotton out in the field. A great place to start then is to recycle material goods and to reduce waste. Each time we throw a cup of coffee down the drain, it's like throwing 130 liters of water down the drain. So reducing food waste can save water. Reducing energy use saves water. Recycling material goods saves water. So if we spread this kind of knowledge and information, everyone can make wiser choices and become more water conscious consumers. And this brings us to more good news. As we shrink our collective water footprint, new opportunities open up to share more water with nature. The less we use, the more there is for freshwater ecosystems and the rest of life. And this is how I think we can have prosperity while repairing and replenishing the water cycle at the same time. Back when I was 15, standing outside my family home, feeling lost and confused, one other thought came to me. Since I wanted to do something on behalf of the earth, what better place to dream of working than at National Geographic? Well, it took more than 35 years, but that dream came true. I spent 6 years as the Freshwater Fellow for National Geographic Society, helping to build tools to educate and communicate about freshwater and develop programs and encourage conservation and restoration of freshwater ecosystems. With great partners, we started an initiative called Change the Course. It brings together businesses, conservationists, and the general public to do the two things we critically need to do: shrink our water footprint, return water to the natural world. Today, under the leadership of the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, Change the Course is accelerating water stewardship. To date, it has engaged 65 corporate partners, supported 120 different restoration projects across North America, and returned more than 100 billion liters of water to rivers, wetlands, and aquifers. So the solutions are out there. The question is, how do we turn things around quickly enough? How do we pick up the pace? Here again, I think we come back to communication. Now, I have to say, I thrive on data, tables, graphs, charts. And we absolutely need good data to make the rational case for wise changes in water policy and water management. But data alone is not sufficient. The data and projections about water scarcity, climate change, biodiversity loss have been around for many, many years. The trends have been very clear, but they haven't motivated the bold action that we need. The reason is that data works only on our minds. To change the way society uses and manages and values fresh water, and to expand the community of concern about water, we need something else. We need more stories. Stories engage not only the mind, but also the heart. Stories can elicit empathy, and it's empathy that leads us to care. And it's caring that leads us to act. Stories take us from the abstract to the real, to feeling empathy for the poor who have just lost their homes to catastrophic flooding, to feeling empathy for the women and girls who must walk long distances each day to collect water, to feeling empathy for the birds who migrate thousands of miles to their winter homes only to find that the wetlands are gone. So please choose your entry point into this journey of water stewardship. Whatever your skills, your talents, your gifts, please join the challenge. Water connects us all. Thank you.
Thank you to Sandra for that contribution. And now I would like to welcome our panelists for the day. Kim Nurse-Gibsted, who is the Executive Director at Grundfos Foundation. Hello, Kim.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Diane Husick, Dean of the School of Natural Health Sciences and Professor of Biology at Moravian University in the United States. Hello, Diane.
Hello. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you too. Carl Ganter, the co-founder of and director of Circle of Blue. Hi, Carl.
Hi, everybody.
And Daniela Boström-Kuff, who is the communications manager at UN Water. Hi, Daniela.
Hello.
So, Kim, I'll start with you, since Grundfos Foundation is the lead partner to the communications initiative during the World Water Week. So I said earlier that the water community has identified communication as one of its major challenges. Why is that?
I think the water community knows that we somehow talk to the same people all the time and communicate to the same people all the time. And we know about the issues, we are aware of the problems, and we hopefully also know a bit about the solutions. So what this initiative should do is try to broaden out the message and maybe engage more people in telling stories about water issues and not least water solutions. We know the World Economic Forum has for years mentioned water scarcity and water as one of the world's biggest problems. And somehow we never discuss the solutions because maybe it's too difficult. Maybe it's difficult for all individuals to really grasp the situation if the water was not there or if it's too polluted to drink. So we need to address it in a new way where we become a bit more constructive. We show ways to solve issues and also highlight some of the new technologies on its way to deal with the situation. We know about climate change. We heard that earlier this month from the UN. We are aware that water is very much related to the climate change and both the problems, but also how to adapt to that. So if we can get some of the positive news, the positive examples where people joined forces to in local community to make sure that there's water enough for all. Maybe a bigger plant or an industrial company took on the responsibility and cleaned their water instead of just pouring it out in the river. Some of these examples would be nice to hear, and also where it could be possible for people to do what Sandra was alluding to, and not just caring, but also acting.
Thank you very much, Kim. And to start off the discussion, Sandra concluded her talk with saying that we need more stories about water. So from your different perspectives that you come into this discussion with, what kinds of stories do you think need to be told? So Diane, what do you say about this?
Sure. So one of the things Sandra talked about was how water influenced her at a very young age. I grew up along the shores of Lake Superior in Michigan and the United States, and that's the world's largest freshwater lake by surface area. And the concept of running out of clear fresh water seems almost inconceivable. But yet we have things like the lead contamination of the water in Flint, which is also near one of the Great Lakes. I currently live in eastern part of Pennsylvania, and we have lots of rivers. We have a lot of rainfall, but there's aging infrastructures, there's lead pipes, there's industrial legacy, and increasingly heavy rainstorms. And people really don't understand how this impacts their health, the property values. And I think we need to make the connections, as Ken said, that to draw the lines between the points so that people understand that these issues are connected, and that maybe that fresh water isn't so fresh and clean that they think it is.
And Daniela, what are your views? What kinds of stories need to be told?
Yeah, I think it was so interesting when Sandra said that we need to go to empathy, because for me, that's really where we in the sector have so much to do, or so much left to do, because oftentimes we stay at this sympathy level where it's like, oh, that seems like a really, really bad thing, and then we have a problem to go towards empathy, because that requires that we connect to the feeling. And I think that we can create feelings in terms of how it feels. If I just give this very stereotypical example of how it feels to carry water on your head with a baby on your back, I can't connect to that feeling because I haven't done that. However, I can connect to how it is to having to carry my 6-year-old who weighs, almost 30 kilos when I carry grocery at the same time. That's awful. It's the same feeling. One is, of course, worse, but it's the same type of feeling. And I think that that's really where we have such a big challenge. And then I think we need to simplify. So it's about creating those feelings and then simplifying and telling these personal and vulnerable stories. And we have a lot left to do there.
So, Carl, what kinds of stories do you think need to be told, and how easy is it to get through in the media narrative of today?
Well, those are two really important questions. One, the type of story we need to tell is one, and Sandra brought this up, of empathy. And also, I think we need to tell stories thinking about epiphanies. So how do we bring a level of epiphany, not just awareness, but actually, what to do? And we need to also focus on particular audiences that pull the levers of change. And those could be policymakers, finance, influencers, and really put them in the picture. There will be, winners and losers, and the losers will be in the status quo, and the winners will be out the front lines. So we do have this in the journalism world. We would call it a scare them and save them moment. So the headlines are going to be nasty, but then how do we save them? And we in the water sector need to pull people in, and need to provide them with real direction, again, what to do. And we also, while I'm talking about kind of the levers of power, the empathy part, whose voices aren't being heard, and how do we give them the tools of trust and relevance and context so that they actually are invited to the table. But we need to do this fast, because, August 9th, the IPCC report, climate change is really catching up on us, and every story we tell needs to have climate and food and energy as part of the subtext.
Yeah. Thank you. And Kim, what kinds of stories do you want to see?
Well, I'm going to add something a bit different now for the discussion, and I need to bring in new people in the discussion about water and also in the communication, because I think we have to engage people in their local communities. We have to engage the NGOs. We need the UN system to back us up. We need the decision makers. We need the people writing in the media, but we also need the industry. We need the business on board. I was so lucky to attend the COP meeting in Paris, where the Paris Agreement was made. That was made because many of big industrial companies acted in Paris and said, we need that deal now. I think we need some of the industries also to engage themselves in the water sector. They know about the climate change. They know about sustainability. They know how to become more green. Maybe it's going a bit too slow in some areas. I would admit that. But take a look at some of the companies working in the water technology business. They would like to be a part of this discussion, but also communicate not only to their investors, but also to their employees, and also engage with the political system and asking for more and more regulation on water. And then there's another discussion also, because you have the good guys in the industry, and there some would maybe say that we're the good guys because we write out a check to an NGO making a campaign, telling a tiny bit of our story, where we somehow pay back for water, a lot of our water consumption. They should be, of course, exposed, because they really exploit the discussion. But water technology companies, but also some of the bigger industries who are willing to go into creating solutions and reporting on some of the progress, I need them in this discussion, because if we bring them in, suddenly you have a very strong push also towards the regulators that are sitting now in all over the world. Many of them do not know how to solve this challenge. But if we bring in the industry, we bring in the environmental movement, we bring in some of the political parties, then I think the discussion could be about solutions instead of only a discussion about problems.
Comments on that from the others on the panel?
A quick comment on that too. I think that's brilliant, and I think those industries, we need to ask more of them than efficiency and say, minor technological fixes. I think the industry needs to be really part of this whole communications push around water, because they have hundreds of thousands or millions of customers that they can communicate to, raise the awareness, leverage their social media, talk about what they're doing good. And then even companies like, even Microsoft has in their water strategy, they announced policy. Companies are engaging actively in policy, and that's news.
Yeah, and I think that what we see a lot with our World Water Day and World Toilet Day, the campaigns, is that a lot of businesses, they do want to be involved, but of course they're a bit hesitant because they think it's the UN's, it's the UN's campaign. So, how can we really be involved? But that's not it. That's not at all the point. The point is that these days they're there for everyone. So every year I get these emails or telephone calls where we have to explain that, of course, they're your days. They're not my day, they're your days. So you can just get involved and you can talk to your hundreds of thousands of employees, and they go, oh, really? And I think that that's really where we have to do a better job of not appropriating, these international days or these sustainable issues. They're ours. It's not like we're sort of Lord of the Ring and with it's mine. No, it's everyone's, right?
Diane, we want to add anything?
That's a really interesting idea. And we, I work with students, and very often these are, as you said, these days that are out there, they belong to somebody else. But I was just imagining during this conversation how to get the industries, which have often been painted with this, the vilified, but show students the really interesting things that companies are doing. Having them look at their sustainability issues, their water plans, and some of the innovations that are coming out, instead of always saying they're the problem. I think these days could be really a chance to have conversations across sectors in ways that we haven't done in the past.
So we talk a lot about the water sector needs to reach out to more audiences and sort of not only preaching to the choir. So we've talked about industries. What are there other sort of target groups that you would prioritize to communicate to from your different perspectives?
Well, I think the media is interesting. That's also why the Grundfos Foundation is supporting this event. I think the media is very important because the media has a tendency, because it's all about hits and clicks and readers, has a tendency that everything should be negative. It's always the scary news that brings in more readers or viewers, and I think that's changing. Here in Denmark, I've been working with a lot of media and journalists about a new institution called the Constructive News Institution with the University of Aarhus, where they try to educate journalists in bringing in the constructive news about how to solve problems, because news is usually always a conflict. Maybe it could be a solution, and so my hope is also that we get communicators and journalists on board to see, well, maybe there could be another way of handling stories about water. It could be about how people go together with other people and change the situation. That's why we have a concrete example from Pakistan, and the Grundfos Foundation is supporting a movie about that will be shown during the World Water Week. Is about people coming together and pushing back towards criminals and corrupted regimes that are stealing the water from the local community. Just showing that it can be done if you join forces to struggle with the powerful people. Change can happen. Another thing is that it's not just the conflict towards these corrupted people in the movement. It's also a strong movie about people on all levels from various corners of the community coming together to make sure that water is for all and not for the few.
So let's hear from the rest of the panel. What do you think about special target groups to reach? We've heard about the media now. Are there other groups that need to be reached?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think finance. I think we should be hosting, weekly meetings on Wall Street and making these moments, because a lot of what we talked about, the media, finance, business, they do hinge on moments of business on quarterly reports, finance on daily ticker prices. So how do we make it relevant? And I think we need to, again, get right in front of them and very persistently put the messages that are relevant to them. So for finance, like I said, they're winners and losers, and they want to be on the winning side. So let's point them in that direction. And then quickly on the media side, inside the media, yes, it's a lot easier to cover bad news. Frankly, it's harder to cover good news. And we have, at least in the United States, a real decline in the mainstream media and the resources. So we have to be much more cognizant about that. And how do we help those reporters and build those relationships so that when they do tell the bad news and the moments, that they can also say, here is what you can do about it. And that's oftentimes what's missing.
Kind of picking up on Carl's comments, one of the things, people in higher ed are very hesitant to work with the media. And I think it's really important to start building trust relationships, especially with local reporters, to talk about, because they're often looking for somebody that's a trusted voice that can kind of translate the technical information. But also then, how do you take these back to stories, turn them into things that your audience is going to be really interested in? And so linking water messages to festivals, whether it's fishing or kayaking or other forms of recreation, where people are at the water, and use that moment to talk about either cleanup that happened about a river that was very contaminated at one point, or about flooding or whatever it is. But bring the reporter with you when you're there with these activities.
Thank you.
And I think that what's so interesting, what you've all said, is that those are very specific target audiences. That's why it's called targeted. And where I feel is that we love to play it safe oftentimes. So we just bunch everyone together and we say the public at large. And that's something that always brings up a red flag for me, because there is no public at large, these days. So where I feel that when we say public at large, it's actually, we need to look back at what is it that we want to achieve and why, what's the message there. So of course, talking about financing, that's a very, very specific group. And to me, when we talk about campaigns, there's two very specific target groups. That's Generation Z and Generation Y. So it's that sort of, they have something in common, which is that when you're young, 15 to 20, you're still shaping your worldview. That's a lot of times when people become vegetarians, for example, and then they stay vegetarians. Or the Generation Y, sort of mid 30s, 40s, is when you start realizing that your life is not infinite and you have kids and you start worrying about the futures. That's when you, again, if I take the example about vegetarians, you can become a vegetarian. Many people do that at that time. So I feel that those two audiences, when we talk about public at large for our big behavior change campaigns, those two are really interesting to have a look at.
And speaking of Generation Y and Generation Z, an important part of their lives is the internet and social media, of course. So how do you think social media can be used effectively to highlight water issues? I mean, we've seen that it can create movements, good or bad.
Yeah, I think social media is great for sharing messages, but I'm not sure right now that we're using it at full power here in the water sector, because, as we've mentioned, and I think as Sandra brought up too, we are siloed and we have different messages that we all put out on social media. But if we take those moments and are able to coordinate those messages around something that's bigger than ourselves and our own organizations, then we can actually start to capture and build that movement. And we have to have a shared message as what do we want people to do? Danielle, as you mentioned, that is really, really, really important. People need to know that tweeting, $20 to their favorite organization, good for you, but that's not really the action at the pace and the scale that we need.
Yeah. Sometimes the most interesting things happen on social media. People are very drawn to images, and it's a way to capture their imagination, and sometimes unintentionally. And I'll just give you an example. I live on an old farm, and I have a lot of pollinator plants that I brought in largely for birds and pollinators, but it turns out it's really good for stormwater runoff and a variety of other things. And pictures like that lead to a chance to have a conversation. People say, well, why did you do this? Or how come you did that? And you can use that as an educational moment. And it might be just a tiny moment. Your audience might be small, but that information spreads and somebody else shares the picture and says, hey, I just learned this from so-and-so. So I think we can use these moments to kind of model behaviors that we want to do to protect watersheds or runoff, fertilizers and things like that through social media.
I think there's a lot going on already on social media, also within the water community. But what's probably lacking is the link to other sectors. Mm-hmm. When we talk about water scarcity, we could also talk about food production in the future, new sustainable farming. We lack to make the link to the dot that has to do with health and hygiene. So we are just as we mentioned before, we are a bit siloed, and we have plenty of fantastic water stories out there, also about the new technologies. But it's for the same audience as always, and we know about these, but we need to raise the awareness elsewhere, and that's why stories, Sandra was alluding to this as well, where stories from around the world is the key to open new horizons for a lot of people. And that's stories about people locally doing something. Maybe also there could be also students in a university coming up with a great idea. It could be the local community going together to invest in better water systems. It could be the industry that's been polluting the water for centuries, now pulling themselves together and cleaning the water instead and telling that story. But we need to link the dots, and that's not easy on social media. You know about that. It's very fragmented. But if we can get some of the media together with us and tell the story, so there's an interaction with other areas, maybe we can highlight some of the interesting water solutions as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's completely correct. And whilst we do that, I think that one of our major issues is that we want to tell these massive and long stories on social media, and that doesn't work. So we have to be shorter and snappier, and we have to, I mean, we look at ourselves, like what I use social media for tips and tricks about stuff. So we should be giving out tips and tricks about how we can manage water and be better water consumers, for example, and then link to our websites where we can tell these longer stories for those who are interested. But I still feel that we're a bit afraid of doing that, because then we say, oh, but this is just so simple, this doesn't have any substance. No, we don't need that there we just need to be short and snappy and engaging. And I was thinking about how the UN, for example, gets trolled a lot. So you have all these people coming in or sort of climate deniers, and we don't even have that. When I was talking to the person who manages our social media accounts, Anna, she was saying, well, we don't have trolls because we have such a great community. So even if someone comes in and starts saying something, you have all the other technical experts that are really interested in water issues coming in and defending already. So it kind of stops there. And sometimes I feel that without wanting to say that I want trolls on UN Water social media accounts, I still feel that the conversation's just happening with those who are already really interested. And sometimes, we need to be a bit open to be criticized and sort of be questioned and then having to respond to it. And there we're not yet.
Thank you very much. Time is running out, not only for this panel discussion, but for the planet. But I would like to give you a last question. We've only scratched the surface here on the challenges of communication, and we will delve deeper into the coming accelerators as well. But Diane, you were part of one of the workshops of the communications initiatives, and you sent out a question at the end of your presentation about hope for the future. So I will like to ask that question to all of you. What gives you hope for the future? So let's start with you, Diane.
Oh, thank you. So one of the projects I've been involved with is a highly contaminated landscape. And you said this is supposed to be hopeful, but it was basically a result of years and years of smelters. And it was on a mountainside that overlooks a river. And people had given up. They had just said, this is no hope. And yet a group of people said, no, we can do better. We can take this mountain that has lost all its vegetation, that is highly contaminated, and turn it into something better. And it is now a thriving ecosystem. There's basically nature-based solutions were used to turn this into a place that's green again. And people come there and cry because they're so happy and want to hear the story of, how did these group of birders or these group of amateurs come and take this mountain and turn it green again? And those are the headlines that I really would love to see is, amateurs or locals turn a mountainside green again.
Thank you, Diane. And Daniela?
What a beautiful example. What gives me hope is the Olympics. And I'm not saying this to joke, but something I really thought about now over the course of the Olympics was the changing narrative. So if you look back at the Olympics, how it's been before, it's about achievements and it's about great personal strength and overcoming, if you have something in your arm that doesn't work, you're still overcoming it. This time around, the whole narrative was about vulnerability, LGBTQI+. It was different. And for me, that gave me a lot of hope because it shows that even something that's so set in stone, like the Olympics, the institution, even that can change with people. And it's the people changing it. And for me, if people manage to change the narrative around water, I think that will bring us a really bright future.
Thank you, Daniela. And Carl?
Yeah, and I think, we're at a really exciting moment in time. I mean, if you look at ancient history, waters defined civilizations, and there have been moments of heroes and victims and villains. And, this is the most important story we will be telling in our lifetimes, and we need to take it on at that level. And I think we have uniquely this really interesting power to make hope visible. I mean, that's what everybody's saying here. And I think every step of the way, we need to do that. We need to tap people's empathy, tap their context, put them in the picture, and then make that hope visible.
Thank you. And Kim?
Well, just a fact, there's never been so many money in the water sector as there is now. This is a huge investment opportunity for professional investors, but also for businesses and industries and also private shareholders. So that's my hope, because people are aware that something has to happen. And we know about new water technologies coming. They are there already. Many of them could fix the problem right now, but we want to go further. And the amount of money being canalized into the water sector is amazing. And that only happens when people are aware that this is serious and we need to solve it. And that's where the investments and the research will be in the future to make sure that we keep this planet a good planet.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you all we appreciate your time and for participating in this panel discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And thank you again to our lead partner, the Grundfos Foundation. Now, I encourage you to have a look at More Than Words, showcasing effective storytelling on water, where visual and performing artists address urgent water and climate issues. You can find these events on the center stage. See you again tomorrow for the second episode of the Accelerator on Communication and Behavior Change. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.